Hi, my name is Spike Barkin, and this is part of an oral history series that is coordinated with the Hastings Historical Society. Today we're going to be talking with Fred Olson, but before we start with Fred's generation, when they went to work, they usually just worked at one job, and that was pretty much their career. And for my son's generation, he has been told that to expect to be working in 5, 6, or 7 different jobs, or maybe even more. It's a whole different ballgame. Fred is unique in that when he went to work, he was working in all different kinds of situations and different jobs. So when people ask, how did you get that job? And they want to know if there's a certain career path. For Fred, 2 words sum it up: can do. And you'll find out what that means in just a few minutes. Hi, Fred. How are you? So, Fred, where were you born?
I was born in East Hampton, Connecticut, on a farm about 30 miles from Hartford, on a hill called Chestnut Hill. And I was, my father delivered me, which was, I guess, not too out of the ordinary at that time. And my friends told me that he did not drop me, so I think that's true, I hope. Anyhow, when I was 2 years old, my father, in a Model T Ford, drove us down to Jamaica, Queens, where he was just finishing up building a house, a 2-story house, and a garage. The house was not livable yet, so he, having 7 children at that time, let me see, 5 boys and 6 children, just one girl. My sister was born a little later. So there were 6 children. In order to make room in the garage, he built bunks on the walls, so we slept in layers. And then after a while, we moved into the house. And at that time, when I was just 2 or 3 or 4, my father had gotten a job at the construction of the George Washington Bridge, and he was a foreman on the bridge, building the bridge, and he brought over a lot of relatives from Sweden, his cousins, his brothers and uncles, and my uncles and cousins, and there must have been 6 or 7 of them in our house, and they lived in our house, so my mother had a tough job. So it was at that time that I was maybe 7 or 8 years old when I was really aware of what was going on, because I just used to sit at the table and listen to the Swedes talking, and I pretty much learned the language that way. And after a while, I went to school. I went to Public School 52, and then transferred to Public School 45, which is in South Ozone Park, near on Baisley Boulevard, Locust Avenue. And I will tell you that was a nice experience. I enjoyed the grammar school, and Public School 45 was the name of the school, and had some wonderful teachers. And in my last year at the school, there was a play called Cinderella, and my father came to see it. I was in the play. I don't know anything about the play. Actually, I know I was the king in the play, and I had to sing a song, and my father was quite pleased, and my mother didn't come. She's overworked. But it's funny how you remember. I can remember the song, and I can remember every part of the song and every word, but now I can't remember what I did yesterday, so that's the way it is. I was the king, and I sang, "I am an exceptional monarch. I know you will all quite agree. No man in this kingdom can equal my great versatility. In 14 languages I converse, recite ad lib, original verse. In fact, I am a highly exceptional man." And that's the thing, it's amazing how that stuck in my memory. And from there on, went to high school and so forth.
And so did you keep on with the theater when you were in high school?
No, yeah, well, yes, I did. We did, my music teacher, Mrs. Wheelant and Mrs. Stopp, were two teachers who ran the music department. And the school had 5,000 students, John Adams High School on Rockaway Boulevard, not quite in Brooklyn. But anyhow, we did the Pirates of Penzance and Mikado, and I was in those plays. I did not have a lead role, but I remember the music. I won't sing the music from that. You know, everybody knows I'm called Little Buttercup, sweet little buttercup, and so forth. No, and then there's another guy, he says, so take my advice and never go to sea if you want to be the ruler of the Queen's Navy. Polish up the handle of the big front door, but don't go to sea and you'll rue. It's great. Anyhow, that was fun. And
So you were doing Gilbert and Sullivan and...
in high school. I also took journalism, which I enjoyed very much. It was, I'd love to write and stuff, and I had the privilege and honor to, the school at Walter Damrosch, I believe, was his 50th, it was an anniversary for Walter Damrosch, the great composer, the director. And the school had asked the students to write something, and they would select a poem which would be written at his celebration, some big 50th anniversary or something. And they selected my poem, which was a poem about him conducting, you know. I know some of the lines. I long to hear the melody whene'er he lifts his arm and wander through chirping wood or under swaying palm, real corny, or at the river's bank. And then they go on, and then in the end they say, Maestro, 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 is there aught that you cannot say? Maestro, maestro, play. That was that was something, you know. So it was an honor for me to do that. I was also, my brother Carl was a construction foreman on Lincoln Tunnel when I was in about the 7th grade, I guess, 6th grade. And I asked him if I could come down to the tunnel someday and write an article for our newspaper, which was called The Campus. It was rated as one of the finest newspapers in the country. I still have a copy of it. Did you see that copy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wrote an article about sort of what's going on in the tunnel. The tunnel under the river is a series of rings, steel rings that are put in there. First of all, when they do the tunnel, they dig a shaft on each side of the river, and they seal the shaft airtight. And they seal it so men can work under 45 pounds, I think it is, something like that. I forget the pressure. However, they can only work on it so many hours, then they have to get it, otherwise you get the bends. But the beginning of where I went down in the shaft, and the part of the tunnel that is before it hits the rings is square, and my brother Carl was building that square part, and I wrote about that, as you remember. I don't want to recite that, but I did say a corny poem in the end, something like when they say. We worked on our bleeding knees, and people said, "Isn't it a pity?" And I said, "No, can't you see we've got a New York City?" Real corny, but it was very nice. But my brother Carl, when I got out of high school, the day after I graduated high school, the very day after I got out, my brother hired me as an apprentice carpenter, and that was on another subway in Brooklyn, Clinton Avenue, I think. And my father, who was then not any longer working as a construction superintendent, he was hired to work he ran the shop for my brother, where they made forms and stuff and filed saws and stuff. And the first thing my brother asked me to do, the very first thing he had me do, as you know, when you walk along the sidewalk, you see ventilators in the sidewalk with the grills. And that's so air can get in and out. So when the train goes by, you don't have a piston effect. So so therefore, outside of the dimension of the tunnel of the subway, you have this little room with the grill over the sidewalk, and this room is concrete wall, and must have been about 4 foot of sand in it, and it's about 20 foot long. And my brother just shoveled all that sand into the track, and I just looked at him and I did what he told me to do. But I was so sore that for weeks that I drove to work with him in the car, and I was just numb. But I got used to it.
So you sang a lot in high school.
Yeah, I sang.
Did you do anything with the singing after you got out of high school?
Well, yes, I did. Actually, it's a strange thing happened. See, for some reason, I must have had some sort of musical. I did take some piano lessons. I would never learn how to play the piano, but someone introduced me to a station in Brooklyn called WARD when I was in maybe the 7th grade or 8th grade or something like that, and I sang a song on that, and nobody in my family knew it except my mother. I told my mom, I said, I'm going to go to Brooklyn and I'm going to sing a song. She hardly believed me. She didn't know how it happened, and I really don't remember how it happened either. But I did sing, and the song was "With My Eyes Wide Open, I'm Dreaming." You ever remember that song? Mm-hmm. It's a nice song. And I sang that, and my mother did hear it, she said, on the radio, because we had no television then. We just had radio. And the radios we had were built by my brother Carl. He built the radios, crystal sets. In fact, when Lindbergh crossed over across the Atlantic, we listened to one of my brother Carl's sets when they're talking that he had landed in Le Bourget in Paris. Le Bourget, I actually landed there myself later on in life.
So just to jump back, you formed a group called the Skyliners. Can you talk about that?
Skyliners.
When was that?
It looks like there are too many things crowding into one space of time, but it was before 1952, okay? And we were all over 6 foot tall. There's a picture in there, I think. And we won the Godfrey Talent Scouts. You remember them?
Sure.
And we trooped around to Canada and out in Covington, Kentucky, and we sang some operatic stuff and some popular stuff. We sang Oklahoma, Oklahoma, where the wind comes sweeping down the plain, and it was great. And then I sang a solo, and they hummed behind me, "Wait Till the Sun Shines Nellie," right into the mic, you know. Wait till the sun shines, Nellie, and the clouds go drifting by. And they would be humming. It was very nice. And then we went to Canada and Kentucky, and the Skyliners, we could have made it. We were good. One guy sang from Pagliacci. The other guy sang, and I sang from Ma Paris. Ma Paris, I think it's Ma Paris, you know that. And but we never made the big time.
So how did that get started? How did you form the Skyliners? Where did you meet the guys?
Doris Stapleton was the pianist and a coach, and she had formed the Skyliners. It was her idea. She had several pupils who were in that. Maybe she had 2 or 3. I'm not sure. Pupils who she's coached for music, you know, and then I was auditioned for her, and I became the 4th member of the Skyliners, and she did the arranging and stuff. I think that she's a very nice person, but I think had we good management, and we would have made it big time. But you gotta. It's sometimes it's booking, and sometimes it's. But I was taken to Paramount Picture Corporation in, I don't know, I guess it was It was it was while I was with the quartet. And I met, what's his name, the director, the guy who's casting director. I forget his name, but anyhow, he was, I met him with an idea to go to Hollywood, you know, so I met him and he says, you're just what we want. He says, put your feet on my desk. So help me. He said, put your feet on my desk, and I'll give you and he gave me a book with Cafe Society. Studied the lines from Cafe Society, and he come back and you can read for me. So I did that, and we had a booking somewhere in Canada, I think, in Montreal, with a quartet. And I also had a fellow who wanted to be my manager, Mr. Lou Enton. And he, before we went to Canada, he took me to Chicago, I think, no, Buffalo or something, to a nightclub out there. And for 2 weeks I sang there. And then I came back. But you know, the thing that bewilders me is I didn't follow through on it. You know what, this casting man, what's his name? He said, you come in here now, and I'm telling you that you're what we want. He said, Jimmy Stewart sat on my bench for 13 months, he said, and before I even saw him. But that didn't even hit me, you know. I don't understand. I think it's not divine intervention, I don't think. It's lack of good sense, you know. But then again, Muriel says, Fred, she said, maybe you wouldn't be happy in Hollywood, you know. You never know, you know. An awful lot of people go out there and drug themselves to death, you know. But that wouldn't be necessary. Jimmy Stewart never did that. By the way, when I flew missions, Jimmy Stewart was my commander, by the way. You know that I told you that.
Right. So so did he offer you a contract?
Yes, they were going to offer me a 7-year contract. And my manager wanted me to sign with him. And he had another man there to be the witness. And I did. I dropped the pen. And we had a date. As I said, we had a date with the quartet, and I left and I never went back to them, which doesn't make any sense at all. It's very stupid. But I did it. So I don't regret it, because I had an interesting life, and I had a most varied life. I did many things that just happened, and it was interesting. I was busy studying voice. I studied voice. I didn't go to work. I paid Madam Patterson, $40, $50 an hour a lesson. I went there and I studied with another teacher, Estelle Liebling. And Wally Johnson, who I had met in Bermuda before, was also studying with Madam Patterson. And we rented an apartment on 79th Street, 76th Street, 39 West 76th Street, just off Broadway. And Wally had a beautiful voice. He's a high tenor, lovely voice. He was Norwegian. Swedish, spoke Norwegian, and I spoke Swedish, so we had fun with doing that. And that was a number of years I did that. And I went to Juilliard for 2 years. And I also went to the David Manis Music School. And then I enrolled in Columbia School of Engineering. And I was there for 2 years, so all of those years. But the singing, of course, the singing I did after that, I studied voice for a number of years. I studied with a woman, Madam Patterson. I studied with a famous tenor from the Metropolitan, not the Metropolitan, he wasn't in the Met, he was an operatic tenor, Bernardo de Muro, who was famous in Italy. A wonderful singer. He made 40 recordings. I have about 6 old records of his voice. And he married a woman from Sturgis, Michigan, and she had a huge farm there, and they would come over here, and I would go, actually, I studied with him in New York, but when he was out here, when she came, when they went to the farm, I would go to the farm and work on the farm and build for them and build. I did staircases and everything, and they got free lessons, you know. So, but after that, he went back to Rome, and then Muriel and I got married in 1952. That was after that incident, and. In 1952, when we went to Rome, we stayed there for 6 months, and I was studying voice. And he sort of pushed me too much. He said that I was a Helden tenor, like a dramatic tenor, and a little less than a dramatic tenor. And I got sore throat, and I went to Rome Hospital, and I'll never forget it, but there must have been 3 doctors looking down my throat, and they said, "Don't sing now. Get this. You're straining too much." So I went back to De Muro, Bernardo De Muro, Commendatore, they called him, the commander, and he said, "They're pazzo, they're crazy." You know? He hardly spoke English, you know. But he said they're crazy. He says, "I know, they don't know. I know, they don't know." So, but I didn't sing anymore. We stayed there for maybe another month, and then we went home. And we lived in Monte Sacro, which is outside of Rome.
Where did you meet Muriel?
I met Muriel, my father bought 4 acres in Huntington, Long Island, and Muriel lived in Huntington at that time. She was born there, actually. And her brother was a plumbing contractor. And when we got to the point in the house when we needed a plumber, I went to the water department and asked them if they would recommend a plumber. And they recommended Wes Myers, who was Muriel's brother. And I drove to the house, and she had all kinds of animals. She had a duck and a dog and a cat and everything. And a grandma who was like a picture in the window with beautiful gray hair. And Betty's sister was going to Juilliard, studying piano. And it was through that association that Betty and I would practice singing for months and months. Every day we would sing, not every day, but many days. And singing operettas, arias and stuff, you know, and it was just a lot of fun. And that's how, and Muriel, who did not play the piano, she plays somewhat, but she doesn't play like Betty. Betty's a very fine pianist.
And who is Betty?
Betty's, pardon?
Who was Betty?
Betty's Muriel's sister.
Ah.
She was going to Juilliard. And then Muriel we'd be singing till 10, 11 o'clock at night, and the grandma's room was right next to that, and she never complained. So it was very nice. And I was treated awfully well by Muriel's mother, and they made special food for me and everything. And then I did a lot of work on the house. I put a big dormer on top of the house. I put a staircase in the back. I did a lot of work for her, which was good for her because she had lost her husband. Muriel's father ran a tugboat in New York, and he came to Hastings and became a custodian at the Huntington High School, and then he died, and she was left alone, and she had to go to work, the mother. So anyhow, after a while, I went back to New York and rented an apartment on where Lincoln Center is, right in the heart of Lincoln Center, 68th Street, West End Avenue. 5th floor walk-up. The rent was $35 a month. And one night I called Muriel 2 o'clock in the morning and asked her to marry me. And she got up and woke the house and woke the town up and said, and she said yes. And her brother, Wes, paid for our wedding, which was a reception in a nice place, Colonial Inn. It was very nice. And then Muriel, I don't go into a long life story, but Muriel's cousins built 120 homes in Huntington, and she was a secretary for them in one of the houses they used as an office. and she used to drive from Huntington to New York in a Woody, a Woody station wagon, an Oldsmobile Woody, 1947 Woody, and she would drive every day from New York to Huntington, reverse commute, and after that, it was. In the meantime, I'm straying off a little. I invented a hidden gutter, which is called Hydrodrain, and I formed a company called Hydrodrain Company, and I got a patent. I got a patent on the gutter. While I was actually at that point, it was later on. I was with Broadway shows at that time. I had gotten into the theater, and I was living in New York, and Buell was commuting, so it was really complex. And I had a show called Folies Bergère with Leslie Caron and Leslie Caron and somebody else, but famous stars. And the entrepreneur who brought the shows over from Russia and France, I can't, you had a cane and a cape, I lost my memory.
It was Sal Hurok?
Right?
Was it Sal Hurok?
Sal Hurok, yes, exactly. You remember him. So we had a show called Folies Bergère. It was the Folies Bergère, I think. And no, it wasn't. It was Comédie Française. There were both. He had two of them. He brought Folies Bergère, and there were a lot of nude women. All they had on their breasts were pasties, And I had an office downstairs with all my daughters' pictures on paintings, schoolwork on the door, and the women would come down and look at them, and my daughters had never seen nude women before. They weren't altogether nude. They had the pasties, but they kept looking, and they just adored my daughters. Anyhow, Saul, one night, it's crazy how things happen. One night there was a foul up. I was, at that time, the head flyman up on the bridge, backstage, and one of the garlands that came in was snagged, and the garland was hanging down. It was going to be in audience view if I brought it in any further, but it was supposed to be in view, but it hooked onto something. So I said to everybody, stop, don't touch anything. So we wouldn't touch any of the lines, and not that line. And when the show was over, Mr. Hurok came on stage. I want to see that young man. I was told that the young man stopped that, saved the show. So he said, I want you to troupe the show. And I said, I can't troupe the show because I'm indentured to a shop, to work at a shop for 7 years to become a stagehand. The local number one didn't have enough mechanics. So they found people like me and Charlie Rasmussen and others who were proven mechanics, and they said if you sign a 7-year indenture, you'll have a number one card, because he used to be father-son only, but not enough sons knew how to use their hands, So I signed the indenture, and Mr. Hurok, I said, I can't go on. I never took a show on the road. I'm not a road carpenter. This is a big show, He says, I want you. He said, forget the indenture. I'll take care of that. So he went to the union, and the union gave in to him. So I took the show on the road. And in the meantime, I had applied for the patent on my gutter. So while we went to Toronto with the show, and I remember the carpenter, there was an old man called Albert, and I called him, and I said, Albert, I need a lot of blacks. I have maybe 6 blacks, sets of black with drapes, with curtains and a border, and I need some pipe. Have you got any of that? He said, no, I have nothing. So we went up there, and I had to bring blacks. If he had blacks, I'd use them. So we got up there, and when I got there, he had all kinds of stuff. And he took a bottle of whiskey, and he said, let's have a drink. Anyhow, it turned out all right, ultimately. At midnight, the whole crew left to go and work at the opera, and I said, Albert, why didn't you tell me they're leaving? He said, Anyhow, it worked, anyhow. But From there, we went to the Carter Barron Theater, which is an outdoor theater in Washington, D.C., outdoor theater. So we're going to put the ballet out, or Ballet de Paris outdoors. And it made some changes in scenery and stuff. But while I was there, since I had applied for the patent, I had paid an attorney money to apply for the patent. I had made the drawings, and so I went to the patent office, and it's tremendous. It's like a town inside. The halls are wide, and I finally found the room where my patent was being looked at, and it sounds like a miracle, but I found the man, and he had my patent on his desk. So I couldn't believe that, but it's true. And they approved the patent, and I got a lot of feedback. Was on House and Home, cover House and Home, Better Homes and Gardens, and in all the magazines. And but the companies that asked me they wanted to market it, big companies, big building companies, big construction, suppliers. They said you have to tell us how to make it, but they couldn't make it. It's too difficult to make. So I had to make it myself, and I worked in a shop, so I had a big lathe, and I cut these shapes, a round shape for the gutter in the shop, and got a whole truckload of it, and took it home. And Muriel and I went out in Huntington, and I had a flyer which says Hyder Drain Company, and a picture of the house with the gutter on it, and we went to the first house. Cerny was the name of the people, C-E-R-N-Y, and they bought the gutter, and we put it on, and you can't see it because it's hidden. And I have a picture. I should have brought the picture on it. Do we have the picture of me hanging on the gutter? No? You can hang on it. It's strong. So in the meantime, to get away from that, which was unusual, that we sold the first one, and then I put it on about 15 or 20 houses. And then Muriel's cousins built 120 homes in Huntington, which I told you. And Muriel was secretary across the street in a place. And one of the contractors who were working from her cousins, who were one of the builders, he said, "I can't understand your husband. He was working on the house across the street, and he took the shingles off the roof that we just put on a couple weeks ago, on the leading edge of the roof. And then he put them back again." I said, "What's going on?" So she said, "Take another look." So she said, "Go real close and look." Because he was looking from the street. He couldn't see the gutter. Because the gutter is hidden behind a curved shingle. And as you curve something, the light is reflected in all directions. And it wasn't a flat plane, see? And behind the curved shingle, the roof was here, and the water was in here. And then he came back, he was amazed, anyhow.
Before you got involved in the war, what were you doing before you enlisted?
Well, as I said, we were working up in Fort Devens, Massachusetts, my brother and I, and another couple of fellows from the neighborhood building barracks. It got so cold we went down to Fort Meade, and we were building barracks down there. However, down there, my brother and I were selected to lay out through the woods and through acres and acres of property where sewers would be dug. And we had it made because we were good at that, and we just had a transit with us, and we would stake out where they're going to dig, you know. So we did that, and I'll tell you, I jumped to a point when I'm walking in New York. I'm walking in downtown New York, and I see a sign about hiring people to go to Bermuda and work on Kinley Field. You know that Bermuda had no airfield. You had to go there in a boat, in a motor, what do you call it, amphibious plane. And they used to land outside of Hamilton. And so this must have been like I know exactly when it was. This was in 1940. I was 20. I'm walking along the street and I see a sign that says, hiring for carpenters or people to work in Bermuda. So that's what it was in essence. So I went in and I signed up. And they said, okay, you're going to go to Bermuda. So I went, they put me on a ship and I went to Bermuda. And I went to St. George's. And when I got there, they took me in a little tugboat. Because there were 5 islands outside of St. George's at the other end of the island. Hamilton's in the middle, and St. George's is in one direction to the east, and then the other place is makes it like a Y. Kings Point, I think they call it. Anyhow, and on the other coast, on the other shore, there was a big boat from the Hudson River called the Belvedere, a riverboat that they pulled down there to use so the men had to have a place to sleep. I never slept on the Belvedere. There were some barracks that were ready for use too, so I slept in the barracks. And I met a young person, a very nice guy from Minnesota. He was in charge of all the electrical wiring in Bermuda. So, and just to make it short, there's a lot of stuff went on in Bermuda. There's no sense talking about it. My brother came down and he worked with me in Bermuda, and we were a wonderful team. You know, he was so smart, and we were building a concrete place where they make concrete, a big tower where we had to dump sand and everything, and it was being built, and we saw a conspiracy to have the superintendent of that job get fired, and so we discovered, this was in the very beginning of that project, we noticed that points were moved, points that they had to build from, marks. But we knew there was one point that was good, that everybody worked from. And Frank says, let's go to that point always, and we will lay out the stuff from that point. So our layout was correct, and the guys who were trying to get rid of the super couldn't understand that. But they didn't know we did it. Anyhow, that's an aside story. Anyhow, after, let me tell you, in Bermuda, I met a girl named Joan Lee, whose father was the jailer of St. George's. In the meantime, we lived in, Wally Johnson and I we rented an apartment above Trimmingham's store. Trimmingham is a supplier of goods, clothing in Bermuda. You may have heard of Trimmingham. You buy doeskin and all the fine materials. And we had an apartment up there, and we got to go to St. George's Hotel for dinner every night. And there was another friend of ours, 2 friends, musicians, and we started singing. We sang practically every night for the big wigs. There were 5 big corporations, White Construction and Slattery, and all the big companies were building this thing. Let me tell you what we're doing down there. Churchill called Roosevelt and said, I need destroyers. We have no more. We're out. So Roosevelt gave him 48 destroyers in place for those 5 islands, so we could build a base down there. So we'd have a base from here, and then we could jump off. So they brought in, I don't know how many dredges from Louisiana and southern, and a dredge is a big square barge with a big pole on each corner. And you take the pole and you stick it in the ground, just on one side, and then you pivot around with a big thing that sucks up the sand from the bottom, and it pumps it out into a big pipe about 6 foot in diameter. And they built these 5 islands, joined them, St. George's Island, Longbird Island, Cooper Island, and Longbird Island, when the government got down there and took over Longbird Island, they found out it was owned by a multi-millionaire, rich American who had not paid his taxes. So the story goes that they gave him $1, and they took the island away from him. Vanderbilt had a huge place down there, huge, right overlooking Castle Harbor. And so anyhow, one night when I started going with the jailer's daughter, Joan Lee, very nice girl. And Wally was going with Jean Outerbridge. She lived up the hill. And Jeannie was a sweetheart. And Joan was too. But I got so friendly with Mr. Lee, Mr. Archie Lee, the jailer, and his wife, that I didn't go with Joan anymore. We had fun talking. Every night we would talk and have fun, and Mrs. Lee, I hit her funny bone. She'd laugh herself sick when I started talking because I had a different way of saying things, And anyhow, but Joan never resented that. And one night, I'll tell you this is a true story. I'm in there, and we found out that Pearl Harbor was bombed. And then after that, shortly after we declared war, Roosevelt declared war on Japan and Germany too, I guess. My brothers, being one of 4 brothers, 3 of them went in the service. And I said, I have to go home. And I had deferment. I could have stayed for the whole war if I wanted to. So I went home, and I was drafted. And they sent me to Camp Upton, Long Island. I'll never forget it. Nobody saw me off. My father's working and my mother's all alone. So I got on the train all by myself and up to... When I got to Camp Upton, I was in a long line, I don't know, from here to London. I mean, 4 abreast. And the sergeant would come up and he'd go like this, like he'd cut the line. He said, you guys do KP, So I had to do KP. Well, I didn't care. And when my KP was they had a whole bunch of steel garbage pails. They were fluted like, A whole bunch of them outside on a hill. So on a small hill, but they were all needed to be cleaned. So I cleaned those garbage pails so clean, they shone in the sunlight. I took sand and I polished the outside. He said, you don't have to do that. I says, I know I don't have to, but I'd like to do a good job. I told the sergeant. I said, I'm going to clean garbage pails. I'm going to be the best garbage cleaner you ever saw. And I was. So then after that, and the amphibious engineers did it. The amphibious engineers were to drive the LSTs at D-Day, And I went in, and I said, I'm with the amphibious engineers. He said, well, the Army needs pilots, the Army Air Force. It was then the Army Air Force, not the U.S. Air Force. And he said, would you like to take the test? I said, yeah. And my friends are on the way to the mess hall, so it was one of these carbon tests. You just, true or false, and it wasn't easy. So he says, you're in the Air Force. I went back to the guys. I said, you're crazy. I said, I'm in the Air Force. So after that, I was taken off the base and sent to Boston, and I met a very wonderful guy, Bobby McHugh, and he liked to drink, and I liked to drink a little bit, and we used to go to the bar, and the other guys did their thing, and we did our thing. But Bobby McHugh and I went all through training together, all right to graduation. And his father was a rich man, and he'd call him Daddy Bob. He'd call him up and ask for money. Anyhow, and so when we left Boston, we went to Montgomery, Alabama, and did what you call pre-flight stuff, learning about planes and how they fly, and what makes them run. And then we went to Florida to fly PT-17s, which we dubbed 2-wing planes. We flew the PT-17s, the Stearman they call them. And Bobby McHugh and another fellow, Bobby Donovan, who was from Syracuse, a wonderful guy. We had a wonderful team, man. Well, we had a wonderful guy. And he and I used to go up in the planes together. He'd give me one plane, I'd be in the other. And we would go up, and go up. You're not supposed to go, so we went up to 12,000 feet with that small plane, and we flipped over on our backs, and we flew down back upside down until we got to about 4,000, and we're hanging on our seatbelts, open cockpit, because all of a sudden you could be gone. So when we got down, my instructor said, "You had this plane, you've been flying this upside down." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, you concave, the gas tank is right in front, on the wing in the front, and it was concave from the pressure." He was a really nice guy, my instructor, and he didn't do anything to me about that. He said, "Don't do that anymore." But you fly for 5 hours about with the instructor in the plane. This was after I got solo, but before that, before you can solo, you have to fly 5 hours, about 5 or 6, until you can fly. So they take you to an auxiliary field. So my instructor took me to a field. He says, and he jumps out. It's sort of a surprise to you. He says, "Okay, take it away." He says, "Just go up, come around and land, and look over at the tea house. I'll be there. If my hands are up, take off again." So, you're very frightened actually, so, because I didn't know he was going to do it at that time, so taking off is easy, because you just pull back on the stick and make sure you give it enough gas and you take off. And I went around a base leg and then down, and then the base leg down here, and I come in for landing, and I'm looking at the field, and I look over at the tea house, and believe it or not, when I looked over at the tea house, something caused me to turn the plane toward them. And they had to run, the two pilots had to run in different directions. I just missed the tea house. When I got that, I thought I was washed. I thought I was going to wash out. So he said to me, he says, "What in the hell are you doing?" I said, "I'm sorry." He said, "Boy, he didn't wash me. He didn't wash me out. Another instructor might have washed me out." So, but after that, I was okay. The only thing I did one time though was when we flew off in the distance, like maybe for a half an hour by ourselves, down in Florida, in this place, a lot of the airfields, they all look alike. They look like with the X's, I landed at the wrong field, and I see a Jeep coming racing out. As a captain, he says, "Oh, here we are again," It happened to other guys. He says, "Get out, get the other seat." I said, "Why?" He says, "I'm going to fly the plane, take you back to where you go." So he took me back to my base. My instructor, he said, "What on earth is the matter with you?" But it wasn't bad flying, it was just not knowing my own field. So he says, "I want you, and I want it on my desk tomorrow morning, I want a map of this area in color. And I want it to be accurate on my desk tomorrow morning." So I had all night long of making this map. Oh my God.
So did you end up flying any missions?
Oh yeah. Over when we got to when I finished basic training in Georgia, which is a Vultee vibrator, and then we got a twin engine plane in advanced training, and I graduated from Valdosta, Georgia. My father and sister came down for the graduation. Then I got my wings, and from there I went to Salt Lake City, and I was assigned to B-24s. I really wanted P-38s. I'm glad I didn't get them, because it's a fighter and it's no fun. I got B-24s and Salt Lake City, and it was snowing, deep snow. And I'm trudging through the snow to the barracks where I will meet my pilot. I was going to be co-pilot, and I'll meet the crew. And I get inside out of the cold and shaking off the snow, and I pulled a cigarette out and I was smoking a cigarette. And Dick Tilton, who's the pilot, he said, "No, we can't smoke on a plane." I said, "I know that." And I said, "Oh my God, I got a winner here." Saying a stupid thing like that to me, In fact, we didn't have any trouble, but we were never buddies, So then We flew out of Salt Lake City, and we flew missions at night. And we flew missions at day, just over the mountains. They had big targets on the ground. Like we were assigned to hit green, maybe green targets. And they could count the hits because we would have colored bullets that would make some kind of a mark in the thing. I don't know. However, when you went on the flight path going down, and your gunners, you have waist gunners on each side, and they're firing, and the nose gunner's firing. Top turret couldn't fly because he's on above. So you fly a straight line where all the targets are, and then you turn right, and you go over a lot of ranches, and the guys were shooting cattle, on the ranches, shooting cows and pigs and stuff. But they had colored bullets so they could trace it back. But the farmers loved it because they got paid for every cow that was killed. They got a lot of money. They got more money than they would get in the market. And then they could still have the cow to eat. So, but I don't think our guys killed any animals that I know of. But one interesting thing about flying out there was at night. We were flying over the mountains, doing some bombing of certain targets at night. And I look over at I look at the pilot, and I was the co-pilot, and I see that he looked like he had neon lights all over his body, little lights going around his eyes and everywhere, all around. And I looked at everything, up and down my arms, and it's called St. Elmo's fire. It's a phenomenon. When the plane is heavily charged with electricity. If for some reason we would touch something with ground, it would blow up, and the electricity is in the whole plane. It's St. Elmo's fire. If people don't know what that means, they can look it up in the dictionary. It's a phenomenon, and I never saw that in my life. Never saw it again. Saw it that one night. But from there we went to. We went to another base, and ultimately we have to go into another base, and we did more flying, and one of the guys was killed there. I saw him take off. Smith took off, and then something went wrong. Anyhow, we went to Willow Run. Henry Ford people were making B-24s. So we took our plane right out of the factory. It was probably tested, but it came out of the factory. I know that because we got in it and we went to Bangor, Maine. From Bangor, Maine, we went to Reykjavik, Iceland. From Reykjavik, Iceland, we went to Scotland. And in Scotland, then we went to a place called Lough Neagh. Lough Neagh in Ireland, where they had hundreds of pilots and crews who were waiting. As the men got shot down, we'd fill in, And it was there that I met Peter Coyle, who was a local Irish guy. And we went to a pub it was in the middle of the farm country. And Peter Coyle, when we went to a little bar there was no chairs. There was a pole that you sat on. And I went to his house, and there were about 10 people in the house, and my head hit the ceiling. I had to do this, and the old woman the grandmother was the one who was the ruler, and she made me some tea or something, an egg, I think. And then I sang for them, and they sang for me. And from there we went to Hethel, Norwich, England, and a crew had just been shot down, and when we went into their room, their stuff was still there. They should take it away, but they hadn't taken it away yet. So from there we flew our missions, and my first mission was what we call a no-ball. It was just over the channel and back. The Germans were firing rockets at England, small rockets, not the V1, V2 rocket. They were little planes that flew, and when they ran out of gas, they It went down. There was no accuracy. So we would hit these on the coast and then just come right back. My first mission was a fellow who had his last mission. And see, they let you go with other person other than your pilot. Even my pilot went with, as a co-pilot to get used to being, and we hit a lot of flak actually. And the flak was actually what came through the ship, but it didn't knock us down. But it was scary. But the pilot was on his last mission, and he was absolutely terribly nervous. I was frightened because of him, not the flak. In fact, at one point I had to fly the plane. He was so nervous because he didn't think he was going to come back. So when we got back to the base, I actually landed the plane. He said, "Don't say anything." I said, "I won't say anything." He was glad to be home. And then from then on, we flew with our crew, and I was co-pilot. And on my 24th birthday, to jump ahead, after we did missions all over Europe, Munich 6 times, and all the cities. We used to fly over the Zuyder Zee and hit into Hamburg and Salzburg, and we even hit France a couple times, a couple of bridges in France. But on my 24th birthday, I made first lieutenant. I got a silver bar, and I got my crew, so I became first pilot. So when you fly a mission, you go to town. Let's say you come home at midnight, and go to Norwich maybe and have some beer and stuff, and you lay down, and 2 hours later a guy shakes you. Okay, mission, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning, and you go to briefing, and so this first mission for me with my crew, which I have not met yet, after briefing was maybe 4:30 in the morning, still dark. I go to the hard stand. The hard stand is where the plane is parked. And my plane was Z-bar. Z with a bar, letter Z, and then a bar up and down, a white bar. And the crew was lying there in the hard stand, half asleep and waiting for me to come. And I said, "I'm Lieutenant Olson," and they introduced themselves. You know, the tail gunner and the waist gunners and the radio operator and the nose gunner and navigator, bombardier, and co-pilot. And I said, "This sounds like it's not true." I said to them, "I don't know how to fly that airplane. I have never landed that plane unassisted." And I said, "If any of you don't want to go on the mission with me, just go back. But I'm going. And anybody wants to come, let's go." It was a stupid thing in a way, but I did it. It's true. And they all stayed. And when I came home, I greased it in. You could have a cup of coffee in your hand, just smooth. After that, this guy knows how to fly. We did a lot of missions.
So what was that like? How did you feel before, during, and after each mission? Did you have different feelings, or?
Well, after the mission, my nose gunner had done 3 tours. He was on his 3rd tour, like somewhere around 80 missions. We would be debriefed, and as soon as we got down, we got whiskey. And my tail gunner was the 18-year-old from Brooklyn, and he didn't drink, so he gave me his whiskey. So when a guy's interrogating me and he says, "How was the flak?" I said, "Oh, it was black," I said. I said, "If you want to know anything about it, see Pritchard. He'll tell you what the mission was like," because I forget.
So were you nervous before each mission?
No, not before, but during it. Ooh. When the flak was, it was during the mission when you're afraid, you know. There were a couple times when you think you're going away. I flew on Jimmy Stewart's wing. He was my commander and the wing commander, and his right wingman, who was maybe 20 feet away. That's how close we flew. I saw it blow up in the air. I saw that he lost his wing and he went like this, and a couple of shoots. And I said over there goes Jimmy, you know, but he made it. He didn't get shot down. And my colonel was really a nice guy, or group commander. He said, when you're in formation, he said, if you feel you have to use evasive action, do it. So on my last mission, I left the group, which was very dangerous. We had gone through a tremendous amount of flak, and this guy was taking us right out, and I didn't understand it, because I said, why don't you, you know, you see the flak ahead of you, for God's sake. But, you know, some of the commanders were different, you know, and so this wasn't Jimmy Stewart, it was someone else. But after we did bombs away, we're still getting heavy flak right on the bomb run. And we dropped the bombs, and I left this formation, and the guys in my crew were screaming at me. And I was very nervous, and I tell you, they were screaming. I said, get off the air. I said, nobody talk on the phone. I know what I'm doing. It's okay. So I joined another group somehow. I got hooked onto a group, and I came home by myself. And when I got to my hard stand, the commander was there. He had come out in a Jeep. And he said, what was the matter? I said, nothing. I just couldn't go through the